have decided that the United States should take military action against Syrian regime targets. Our capacity to execute this mission is not time sensitive. It will be effective tomorrow, or next week, or 1 month from now. And I'm prepared to give that order. I will seek authorization for the use of force from the American people's representatives in Congress. While I believe I have the authority to carry out this military action without specific congressional authorization, I know that the country will be stronger if we take this course, and our actions will be even more effective.
It was a stunning announcement today in the Rose Garden. The president saying he's decided that it is the right move to strike Syria, but that he wants to get Congress's authorization before doing so. Senior administration officials tell us that he made that decision completely turning around the recommendations and the policy that was in place last night after a walk on the South Lawn with his chief of staff, White House chief of staff, Dennis McDonough. Apparently he walked for about 45 minutes and came to this conclusion. This, of course, after Secretary of State John Kerry presented a forceful case yesterday.
And it matters deeply to the credibility and the future interests of the United States of America and our allies. History would judge us all extraordinarily harshly if we turned a blind eye to a dictator's wanton use of weapons of mass destruction against all warnings, against all common understanding of decency. And that is at the core of the decisions that must now be made for the security of our country and for the promise of a planet where the world's most heinous weapons must never again be used against the world's most vulnerable people.
The president met with his national security team in the Situation Room, and officials are telling us there was division within the administration about his decision, and you can kind of read some of that on some of those faces in that room. With that, let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. Juan Williams, columnist with The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles.
Well, this is rather astonishing. We'd heard yesterday from the Secretary of State, as you showed in the clips, that apparently what's at stake here is the children of Syria, innocents around the world, the national security of the United States, decency and an international norm against the use of weapons of mass destruction. All of that is at stake, and we have to act, or as he said, history will judge us harshly. Then you get a president who comes out the next day and says, well, yeah, I decided I'll do it, but I'm going to wait until Congress ends the vacation, has the barbecues on Monday. We'll give it a week, and then even if it's a month, who knows, we'll have a debate and I'll make the case. And then he goes off and plays golf. On Tuesday, he goes off to Sweden and the G20 in Russia. This is a declaration of unseriousness. The region is looking at him. He's a man who stood up and said, a red line 6 months ago.
And only a year ago was the first one.
It was a year ago, and then 6 months ago it's crossed. He ignores it. It happens again, and he blusters. The Secretary of State states all of the stakes. They leak all the information about the great strike America is going to make, and then he goes off, plays golf. In the region, you show the Foreign Secretary of Syria, the deputy who said Obama is a joke, and I think that's the way it's being read by enemies of the U.S. and unfortunately by the friends who remain, whose lives hinge on America's word, and now see a president riddled with indecision and what is obviously retreat.
Juan, it's obviously his decision very popular with the American people who are against any military action, and popular with a number of people in Congress who have been calling for authorization. It doesn't appear that it was popular with his national security team.
No, and from what I understand, it's not popular with Secretary of State Kerry. And there's some concern over at the Pentagon, but it's equivocal because they still believe that they can do this and it will have effect. But what they want it to be is more specific as to what the goals are so that they can be judged to have achieved those goals, Brett. But overall, I want to come back to your first point and to something Charles said. I thought Charles made the point for Congress supporting this president when the vote comes. And that's not clear that that vote is there right now to support him. But the argument has been made. Just on a personal level, going into this week, I was not supportive of this intervention, along with 80% of Americans, Democrats and Republicans, who think we have been in wars and it's not clear what we were doing if we went into Syria, whose side we were on, and whether or not the bad guys, Assad, was in fact holding back people who might one day bite us, Al-Qaeda. But I think the President and Secretary of State Kerry made a strong case leading up to this moment, which is why it feels so empty right now that they didn't act. But if you look out at the broader picture, the fact that the American people have questions about intervention, the fact that the Congress has been very clear that we want to say, I don't think that this is going to look bad to history.
What about, Steve, the reporting of James Rosen about a senior State Department official saying that the decision has been made, that there will be some sort of military action no matter what Congress does?
I'm deeply skeptical of that. Look, I think to a certain extent we're overcomplicating this. This is a president who doesn't want to be involved in Syria, period. I think that explains everything that we've seen from this administration over the past 2 years, from everything we've seen over the past week. Look back at these sort of critical junctures in the public deliberation of the U.S. action in Syria, and the president has shown his hand. Remember when there was a robust discussion about arming the rebels early, the moderates, when it was the Free Syrian Army, not complicated as much by the contributions of jihadists. The president overruled Hillary Clinton, David Petraeus, Leon Panetta, Martin Dempsey in terms of arming the rebels at that point. As Charles points out, the red line had been breached. The president had promised serious consequences. And then with a shrug of the shoulders, the United States, in effect, did nothing. Now you've got, apparently, consensus on his national security team that the United States needs to strike for the reasons that Secretary Kerry laid out, I think, in a quite compelling way yesterday. And the President of the United States, once again, shrugs his shoulders and throws up an obstacle in his own way. I think the bottom line is whether you agree with intervention or not, whether you agree that the President of the United States should take this to Congress or not, the incompetence on display over the past week has been absolutely breathtaking.
Members of Congress weigh in on all sides.